Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. The Center for Coaching Certification is absolutely thrilled to have Sue Stoen here of the Clarity Quotient. And I'll give you a hint. One of the reasons we are so excited to have her here, we're very, very lucky. Sue typically does this program as part of her business. So to have it available to us is absolutely fortunate. We're excited that she's going to share this wisdom with us. For those of you that are interested in bringing this program to your group, that is going to be an option, whether it's via webinar or live. She does do that. So she'll give you her contact information at the end if you want it. In the meantime, I'd like to go ahead and just give you a couple of quick housekeeping things. I will be keeping everybody on mute. We have such a large number attending the program today, it is absolutely impossible to have everyone unmuted. What I can do is this. There are two ways that you can reach out and ask questions. One is going to be by raising your hand, and I can unmute you momentarily while you ask your question and then mute you again. The other option, which is the ideal for today's program, given the number of attendees, is going to be to have you type in a question on the question panel. Now, Sue has packed this presentation full of information and ideas and tips for us, which means we're going to take the questions at the very end of the program. It is possible some of them get answered as we go through. So my recommendation is feel free to start jotting notes to yourself of questions you may want to ask, so that at the end, if it's not answered, you do remember your question and type it in so that we can give those to Sue to respond to. In the meantime, I'd like to go ahead and introduce Sue. Sue Stoen has been creating winning business presentations for more than 20 years. She is the principal and founder of CQ Communications, a business communications firm that works with companies to create compelling business and visual stories well told. Today, she is going to reveal to you the keys that are vital to creating great presentations and what you can do to stop subjecting your audience to the death by PowerPoint. Sue will share lots of tips and insights into the software nearly everyone uses and yet loves to hate, PowerPoint. Please welcome Sue Stoen. And I am going to be giving Sue control of the screen so that you will start seeing her PowerPoint momentarily. In the meantime, I'll just give you a heads up. She did create mine, and I very much appreciate that as well. Sue, thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Kathy, and thanks so much for everybody for being here today. As Kathy said, my name is Sue Stoen. I'm delighted that you've decided to sit in on our conversation about one of my favorite topics, PowerPoint. It's almost embarrassing to admit that, but yes, I am a PowerPoint nerd, and I kind of like it. Before we dive into our content today, I would like to ask you how many of you have ever sat through a presentation and felt like the people in the picture on your screen? We're going to actually do a poll. Kathy and I are tag teaming today, so she's going to launch the first poll, and I want to get a feel from the audience. In general, how dissatisfied are you by the PowerPoint that you typically see? You have a few choices there. Hopefully one of those things expresses to you how you feel about PowerPoint. I'm really curious to know, and it will be helpful for me to see if we've got people that are already kind of on board or maybe need some persuading that this is actually a helpful tool. So I'll give you a few, half a minute yet to vote, and then we'll share the results of that poll so we all kind of know how we feel about this topic today. I'm kind of assuming that most of you are here today because you use PowerPoint or you have people on your team that use it and you want to give them maybe some ideas about what they could improve or do better. How's it looking, Kathy? Are we ready to?
We've got 85% have voted, so anyone who has not voted, please click on whichever one of these answers is most true for you. We'll give it just another moment. I'm up to 89% have voted, too. So you tell me when you want me to close it out.
All right. Well, it can't be a question that takes too long to figure out, right? I mean, we all kind of have our opinions about how we feel about it. So let's go ahead and close that poll, and I want to know how this looks. What are our results?
Here you go. Here are the results.
Okay. Well, there you have it. We're kind of all over the place, aren't we? Nobody feeling too extreme about it.
Pretty heavy. 42% say half the time, 33% say quite often, and 4% say all the time. So definitely have.
We have room for improvement, don't we? Well, that's terrific. And let's go back to the slides then. Thanks for your participation on that. What I'm hoping is that after our presentation today, people will have some better ideas about what they can do with their presentations and stop having an audience that's looking at them like this. Before we dive into our real content, I want to do something real quick because I like to figure out kind of where we've gone wrong with this software, right? It is a tool, after all. I think one of the things we can do is take a quick little walk down memory lane and see where we've gone wrong. So I don't know about you, but personally I think this is where PowerPoint originated. These cave dwellers were probably better storytellers than we are today because they weren't using spreadsheets and flowcharts and graphs and bullet points to get in the way when they told their stories. What did they rely on? They relied on simple pictures, right? Well, of course, we evolved. Anyone remember this method of visual communication? And we had these great strides in technology, so what did we start doing when we had this? We started projecting our data. And this is where our stories got a lot less interesting, right? We started projecting that text and charts and graphs and all that stuff. Well, evolution continues, and our next big step was this. If you were really lucky when you had to do a presentation and you had a budget to spend, you got to make 35mm slides. I worked at a company where this was my job, to make those slides. And I'll tell you what, I learned real quickly to number those slides before I loaded them in the carousel, because there's nothing worse than dropping that carousel and having all your slides spill out and then not knowing what order they go back in. Well, okay, enough reminiscing. Really, since 1987, when PowerPoint was first released, with all of its benefits, it has had a number of challenges too, I'll be honest. And let's face it, PowerPoint gets a pretty bad rap these days. Some people see it like this. Isn't it sad that we've come to this, that we see PowerPoint as a form of torture? But I am willing to bet that everyone on this call has been in a presentation where they felt like that PowerPoint was just torture. And I talk to people every day about PowerPoint, and they love to share their worst stories with me. And they have a lot of valid complaints. And I'm going to address a lot of those complaints today. So to understand why so many of the PowerPoint presentations that we create just miss the mark, I think we need to do a better job of understanding how people learn, remember, and take in information. There's been a great deal of research done on this. I would like to do another poll here. Can you help me out, Kathy, and launch that second poll? What I am going to do with this poll is ask you, how do people take in information in a presentation? And I've given you 3 scenarios there. Which do you believe is how people take in information, especially in a presentation setting? You've got 3 choices, so tell me what you think these studies have found.
And so far, 70% of the people on the call have voted. Actually, we're up to 85% now, so just a few seconds longer, and we'll have the vast majority of them in. If you have not voted, please vote.
Super. It's not a trick question. So how did we do?
I've got 91%. You tell me when you want me to close it out.
Let's close it.
Okay. And with 94% voting, here are the responses.
Okay. We have some smart people on the call. Not that if you guessed wrong, you're not smart, but you're exactly right. Let's close that. The majority of you guessed the correct answer, which is how people take in information in a presentation. There was a study done by Albert Morabian at UCLA, and this is what he found, that when people are taking in that information, 55% comes in visually, 38% through the voice, and only 7% by text. So what does this mean in the context of PowerPoint? What it's telling me is that if we really want to communicate with our audience, we've got to speak in more pictures and less text. Because really, at the end of the day, PowerPoint is not a teleprompter. And we've got to stop using it that way. Now, my goal today isn't to convince people that they need to use PowerPoint, because I'll be the first one to tell you that not every presentation needs it. My goal is to convince you that if you choose to use PowerPoint, there are things that you can do better. And hopefully by now you're starting to ask yourself, well, okay, what can I do to make this better? And as I stated earlier, I really think one of the first things we need to do is to start creating slides that will help people understand and remember in the way that they learn. It makes sense, right? Now, I have a number of studies and papers that go very deep into this topic. If this is something you're interested in, send me an email after the webinar. I will share my email address, and just send me a quick note and say, I'm interested in those reports. We actually could fill up the whole hour talking about why people need this kind of information, but we don't have time, and I want to give you some tips that you can use. So remember, at the end, just send me a quick email, and I'm happy to send those PDFs out to you. How do we get back on track with our PowerPoint? This is what I want to cover with you today. These are the areas that I see people struggling with the most, and they really are the keys to creating great PowerPoint. So let's dive in and start giving you ideas. The first thing I want to talk about is alternatives for bullet point lists. We all have experienced something that I call list fatigue. And that is when you sit through those presentations that look like this, right? We've all experienced it. And what happens? By even 2 or 3 slides, we are disengaged. We're tired of the presenter reading to us. And if you're like me, you're making your grocery list or thinking about what you have to do when you get home that night. And that's not the kind of reaction we want from our audience, right? So what can we do different? What I want to show you next are a bunch of ideas that are literally before and after slides. These are all real presentations. They're projects that came from clients of mine, and they demonstrate a before, which is a typical list, and then an idea about what you might do instead. So bringing in a great visual, minimal text. And here are those slides next to each other so that you can see them and see for yourself, really, what's more compelling, what's going to be more interesting for the audience, and hopefully give you some ideas about what you could do different. Here's another example, another typical before slide. Again, not very interesting. What if we do something like this? We don't have to list our information in bullet points. And it really brings it to life when you add a picture. Here they are again, side by side. All right, here comes another one. Sorry to do this to you, but these are all real projects that came in, and this is what this presenter was using, talking about ideas in the workplace, elements that your ideas need. What if we do something a little more interesting, like this? And what happens when we start to assign symbols to our topics, like the ear, when we say that our ideas need to be communicable, then when we talk about that topic again later in the presentation, we show that symbol again. So we're putting an imprint on our audience, a visual imprint, so that every time they see that ear now, they connect that idea, that thought, with that visual. So assigning simple symbols can be very helpful for your audience. Here's one. Anyone a fan of tables? I know this isn't a bullet point list. It's actually bullet points in a table, but that's pretty overwhelming, right? How about something like this? I mean, we are talking about success, and that involves people, so there's some great pictures here and a much more compelling way to share that information. There they are side by side. Here's another one we're going to talk about. What do leaders have in common? These are their attributes, their traits. Okay, a list. Well, yes, we can read that list, but what if we use a different format for putting that information and we add a picture of someone who demonstrates that quality or trait? Really brings it to life in a whole different way. And there they are again, so that you can see the difference. Here's one. Now, the challenge with this is these are quotes, right? And quotes are text, unless you're recording some little video snippet, which probably isn't practical. So we've got text. Well, what do we do with text-heavy slides like that? There's a couple of simple things you can do, adding a strong picture and then just some simple graphical elements. Those rounded rectangles to divide that text up really makes that much easier for your audience to observe or to look at while you're presenting. Here we have another table. It's data, information, not very interesting. How about adding some pictures and thinking about a different way to use the space on that slide? And in a real setting, or not that this is in a real setting, but probably when this presenter is using this presentation, they're going to use animation and bring those things, those statistics in one at a time so that you can focus even better on the point they're making. One more. This one's not very pretty. That's pretty overwhelming. This definitely would cause list fatigue, right? This one is going to use a little animation. So if you're not printing your presentation, what you can do is make that first point and then bring in your subpoints so that you can cover those, and then make those disappear and cover your second point and the subpoints. So if you really have to have all that text, an idea like this can help you manage it so that your audience doesn't have to look at all of it at once. And as I mentioned, this doesn't work real well if you're printing your presentation because those text boxes are laid on top of each other. So you'd have to come up with a different solution for something that you have to print. But if you're not doing handouts, this is a great solution for dividing up all that text and giving it to your audience in kind of bite-sized pieces. Here's another idea. Let's say you have a list, and these are all topics, they're services that we need to list. Put a nice picture in the background so we can still kind of convey some emotion here. And the newer versions of PowerPoint are really great with the photo manipulation you can do. You don't have to have Photoshop. You can do this right in PowerPoint. Give it a nice shape and a nice light tint so that your text stands out well against that picture. Here's another idea for you. Instead of putting this information about our services in a list, let's use some graphical elements and a little simple animation and bring it in that way. I want to pause for just a minute and talk to you about resources for pictures. A lot of times people will say, I don't even know where to get pictures. The first place you can look is Microsoft. They have a great resource and a great image library that you can tap into. Especially nonprofits have no problem using the Microsoft stuff if you don't have any budget at all. And they tend to add stuff to it quite often. But I do want to mention to you that the days of clip art are over. And so no one, except maybe our sixth graders, but nobody else should be using any clip art in their presentation. It used to be what we did. We don't anymore. There's way too many great stock photos out there. So I really encourage you to tap into either the free or the low-cost resources that I'm sharing here. And I'll give you a minute to jot some of those down. Otherwise, you can just do a search on Google and put in royalty-free stock photos, and you will get a lot of resources. And most of the time, I pay anywhere from $8 to $10 for a stock photo, and I can use it over and over again if it's royalty-free. So that's an idea for you about other options to those bullet point lists. Let's move on and talk about some of the common mistakes I see people making. And before we go much further, I do want to share one last survey with you. There's a gentleman, Dave Parody, and he does a survey every year or two of people who watch PowerPoint presentations all the time. And he asks them, what presentation traits are you annoyed by? And before I share what his survey said, I'm going to do one last poll, because I want to ask my group here today, what are the things that are annoying to you? So Kathy, if you could launch that last poll, we're going to give you some ideas, and you vote for the one that you find the most annoying, because all of these, frankly, are pretty annoying. So it's either the text is so small I couldn't read it, the slides were hard to see because of the color choices, when the presenter puts full sentences instead of bullet points, when the speaker reads the slides to me, or when their slides are just full of these overly complex diagrams or charts. Those are your choices. Choose one that's your most annoying.
We've got 86% have voted, so we'll give it just a few more seconds.
Okay.
If that's okay with you, Sue.
Yes, it's okay.
And one thing I got to share, I'm feeling like I'm going to schedule some time to go back and do some more work on my PowerPoint. So this is good stuff. We are up to 94% voted. You want me to go ahead and close it out?
Please.
So,
yes.
So
how did we come out here? Okay, interesting. Should we see how our poll matches up with what Dave found in the survey he did? One other thing I want to say with my squishy tomato here is that I love that he's asking audiences what they're annoyed by, because for me as a presenter, the last thing I want to do is annoy my audience. It's really not the emotion I'm trying to evoke. And so I just love that he's using that word, annoyed. Well, let's look at the results. And here we have it. I put them in order that his survey showed. 74% of audience members are annoyed when the speaker reads the slides to us. That's a big number. That's 3/4 of your audience. And those others have a pretty good amount of annoyance factor to them also. You know, when we're putting full sentences instead of bullet points, or having the text too small, and those things are all related. If you think about it, the more text we put on our slides, the smaller our font has to be, right? And I also heard that they have decided, or somebody did another study, and I'm not going to quote this very well because I don't have the source in front of me, but the more text we put on our slides, the more likely we are to read it, literally read it to the audience. So let's move away from using PowerPoint as a teleprompter, stop reading our slides to our audience, and start giving them the information in the way they want it without annoying them. What's the first thing we can do? Well, let's address that problem of too many words. Too many words on the slide. I would guess that a number of you have heard of the 6x6 rule. It's been around for a long time. Somehow we've been ignoring it for a long time. But the 6x6 rule states that a slide should have no more than 6 bullet points And no bullet point should have more than 6 words. And there are people out there who think those numbers are too high and that it should be even smaller. So the next time you're thinking about, are my slides too wordy, remember the 6 by 6 rule. I want to show you an example of a real client project where we applied the 6 by 6 rule. So here we have something clearly not very compelling, pretty text heavy. What do we do? Here's that slide after. Now, a couple of things changed. Yes, we put a different background on that slide, but what's really important is we did a lot of editing. We took away a lot of words, and that gave us room to add a visual that starts to underscore the message we're trying to make, right? Now, if you were paying really close attention to that first slide, you'll notice that we really did a lot of editing. And that's because in addition to the 6 by 6 rule, there's one other fundamental PowerPoint rule that everyone should be following. And that is that every slide should only have one message. One message per slide is the guideline. So if we go back to that original slide, and if you really wanted to read this and dive in and figure out what the heck they were talking about here, you would understand that not only did they have too many words, they had too many messages on this slide. So the solution is to divide that slide into 2. And that way, we have the space then to use different images that help underscore each of those messages with our audience. Remember, we're trying to tell visual stories, visual pictures to help people know what our message is. And by following those 2 rules, we were able to create much more impactful slides. Now, this is a common slide that you'll see where people really try to put a lot of information on their slide. And if they push back on me when I tell them we need to take away some of those words, they say, but my audience needs that information. Well, there is a solution for that. And the solution is not to project all that text. The solution is to take the detail that your audience needs and put it in the notes section of your slide that's underneath there, and then print out a handout that you can distribute either while you're talking or after, so that your audience can take away that detail, but don't make them try to look at that while you're presenting. It's just too much. My point here is really encouraging you to think about, what can I give my audience as a handout? What kind of detail can I send with them rather than putting it all on my slide? Because it will get in the way if we put it on the slide.